So we'll start developing our functions from what's logical, our start function. It is the first one that gets run here. So in our start function, we want to get the initial position of our object, and we're going to set that just to our myTransform. That way we've got that initial position, and it's a good one to hang on to, and we may be using that a little bit later. So in here, we're going to go ahead and use our myTransform and set that to our current transform position. So let's do a myTransform, and this is going to equal, and what's it going to equal? It's going to equal the transform dot position of our object, our game object. So our transform, and let's see if we can get that in there. There we go. Transform dot position, and that way it's going to store the vector 3 inside of there for the XYZ position. And then the next thing we want to do is go ahead and store the reset move speed to the current move speed. So we're going to go ahead and set our reset move speed and make that equal to our move speed variable. And if we can see that, we'll go ahead and type in a little more. There we go. Okay, after that one, we are looking at our getting an instance of our object. So we're trying to get to linking to the player properties. So let's go ahead and set that one up. And we'll set that up as a link to, keep this nice and simple. Link to our player properties, and equals our get component. And what component are we going to be getting eventually? We are dealing with our player character, and we're going to be dealing with our player properties. So we'll link up with our player properties. And then the other one we want to do is we're going to be getting our controller, and that's going to equal get component. And what are we getting? Our character controller. And after the character controller, we're also going to be hooking up to our anim play component. Or our anim sprite, excuse me, component. And we'll make that equal to our anim play. We're going to be getting component. And what are we going to get? Our anim sprite. Okay, so we made connections getting the components for the player properties, the character controller, and the anim sprite. This is going to get us moving in a good direction when we get started with our start. Now, as we have started to set up a character controller connection, what we do need to take notice of is that on our prefab, we don't have any character controller set up. So let's make sure we add that component to it. So we're going to go to our components, and we'll go down to our physics and our character controller. That's going to say losing prefab. That's fine. We'll make a connection back to it in just a moment. Replace existing component. We're going to add to it because what it's asking for is the box collider. We have a box collider on there. We want to keep both of them, so we'll do add. Okay, and let's go ahead and take a quick look at our character controller. It is a little bit bigger than what we actually want it to be, so let's move this down a little bit and into a better position for us to work with. So let's take this, and let's go something a little bit lower. Let's go to about a 0.3325, somewhere in that range for the height. The radius, if we'll shrink that up a little bit. Let's shrink that up a little bit more. There we go. And let's even bump it up just a little bit. There we go. And for our slope, we're looking for something that's 45 is fine. Our step off 3 and 8, move distance. Let's get to centering this a little bit more on our character here. We want this right in the middle of our character. One of the things that you're going to find is that when you're setting this guy up, that it's not quite this being on the bottom of it. So we want to make sure that we get it in just the right area. So if we come in here, let's say we hit play, and let's actually get them turned on. We'll go ahead and remove our rigid body from this one. We've got our box collider. Let's set that one as a trigger. And with that, we basically have our enemy set up pretty much like we want him. We've got the character controller set up pretty close to in range. Once we apply some gravity to the character and pull him down, we can find out just exactly where is he going to land and make sure the feet are touching where they need to, just like we did with our Mario character. The other thing we're going to look at is we've got this big bounding box. Now, Mario is going to be running over, jumping on top of our character. If he collides with one of the sides of our character as he's jumping up and over, then he's going to end up killing the character. So we need basically two colliders. We want one that's for the body of the character to push him back, but we also want one for the head of the character to be able to judge for just strictly the feet hitting the head, killing the character. So while we're working with the prefab, let's go ahead and make this box a little bit different so it conforms to what we need down the road. So we'll go over to our box collider. We've got it set as the trigger. We're going to change up the size of this a little bit. We're going to go ahead and set this to something a little bit smaller along the width. We're going to go ahead and set the height of it a little bit smaller as well. We could go somewhere around 1.5, 1.6 should work fine. The size left and right, we could stick with the 1 or shrink it up to about a 0.5 just so we can see this a little bit better. We'll go ahead and go into a more of a perspective view. And then the next thing we want to do is move this trigger box up top. We want to get it higher up to where Mario is actually going to be landing on. So we can just bump this up, and where we put it, somewhere in this range, we ought to be fairly close. So we'll leave it at about a -11. I think we'll be close enough to work with. And with those changes, let's go ahead and apply that back to our prefab. And I think that's going to do it for tying off the basic setup of our character. Make sure that he's all set up just right. We have our tag for enemy, so we're looking good there. And we also have our enemy properties showing up, which we're going to be working with in just a little bit as we start filling out the functions. Alright, so the next one we're going to look at, we're going to start with our update, and we'll set some of the states with a switch statement for what position the character is actually in. We'll do that next.